I've been asked to comment on Donald Trump's offshore bank accounts because ever since the former U.S. president's tax returns were put out, people are poring over every detail. They're talking about where Donald Trump has been storing his money, where his business interests are, and as someone who has some experience with offshore bank accounts, I thought I would be qualified to speak on what these politicians and media members are getting wrong. My name is Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of a company called Nomad Capitalist. We help entrepreneurs and investors legally open offshore bank accounts and offshore companies and get multiple citizenships to protect themselves and to diversify themselves because we're living in crazy times with crazy politicians who want to take your money. And I'm not sure that's why Donald Trump had offshore bank accounts. I mean, there's many different reasons why you would have an offshore bank account. One of them is you want to have diversification, whether it's just, I don't want to have all my money in one jurisdiction. These countries are getting a little grabby, right? I mean, you look at what's happened in all kinds of countries in the last year. I mean, from Canada to China to, all over the world, China. People are coming and taking your stuff. They're taking your wealth. They're taking your freedom. And so the idea that you would keep all your money in one jurisdiction, in the United States, where Donald Trump lives and where he's a citizen, you have to report through a filing called FBAR, among others, where your foreign bank accounts, where your foreign brokerage accounts, where your foreign financial accounts are, trusts, corporations. It's all reportable on various different forms, either with your taxes or actually directly to the Treasury. And so you're not hiding anything. You certainly shouldn't be. But you can have diversification to where your money's in different places. Your money's in different currencies. Or I think in the case of Donald Trump, your money is simply in places where you are doing business. So one of the highlights from an article in God help us, The Guardian, was Donald Trump's tax returns indicate that he held overseas bank accounts while he was president. Now, to The Guardian and to many of the people in the news, that alone is simply, oh my God, why is he doing that? The average person, of course, does not hold offshore bank accounts. And by the way, if they do, let's say they're a dual citizen, they happen to live somewhere else, they've got a home somewhere else. I know Canadians who own homes in the United States or Americans who own homes in Mexico. They don't look at it as an offshore bank account. But the reality is there's plenty of legitimate reasons to have an offshore bank account. I own homes in a number of different countries. You want to have a bank account there because you want to pay your bills, right? If you ever to rent that house out, you'd want to receive the rent. You'd want to pay your taxes on that rent. Is that the kind of offshore bank account most people think about? No, the media is not going to tell you that, but of course, there are plenty of reasons. If you have investments in other countries, I get dividend income from places around the world. There's certain rules and restrictions on where that money should be sent or how it should be received. And so offshore bank accounts is a dirty word to the average person. But that's partially because in the United States, people just don't travel that much. They don't have passports. They don't go that many other places. And they think, oh, this is the best place, even though not a single U.S. bank cracks the top 50 safest banks list. One page, this is The Guardian, of the returns, the tax returns from Donald Trump, indicate that the UK, Ireland, China, and St. Martin were foreign countries where Trump's financial accounts were located. Now, one thing they don't specify in all this is, are these Donald Trump's personal financial accounts, i.e., I go to another country, I open a bank account there personally. Okay. These to me seem like countries where Trump has business interests. And so if you are a U.S. person, as it's called, a U.S. citizen, green card holder, he's a U.S. citizen, you're required to report the accounts which you have an interest in. And so if you're the owner of the Trump organization, if you're the ultimate beneficial owner of the Trump organization, or one of them, you're going to have to report those accounts. If you have signature authority over accounts, you can report those. So as I understand, Trump has golf clubs in the U.K., has a golf club in Ireland. Going to Ireland, was looking at the Trump Golf Club. Not sure about China, not sure about St. Martin. I seem to think that I recall that Trump had some kind of villa or some kind of property somewhere in the Caribbean. I'm not sure if that was St. Martin. Again, if you had a property somewhere, by the way, that's not only a legitimate reason to have a bank account in another country, but it's a reason why a bank might actually open an account for you. What people don't realize is these days you can't just go to another country and say, in most cases, hey, I'm here, I want to open a bank account. We've talked about a few, and even some of those are becoming a little bit more difficult, the Georgias and the Ecuadors and things like that, that are relatively straightforward, and they allow foreigners, they allow non-residents. If you have millions of dollars, Switzerland and places like that. But I can tell you, I was just going through Europe, and banks in Monaco, even for millions of dollars for certain people. They don't want your business. And so people think you just go and you walk in like you're opening a Chase bank account. You put your $50 in, you get a coupon for a free toaster. They may, okay, we'll get you the toaster. It's in the back. Sheila will bring it out. It's not how it works. In St. Martin, for example, I mean, most Caribbean banks, because they are small jurisdictions and they rely on intermediary banks, and the U.S. Central Bank is breathing down the neck, just everyone's breathing down their neck, you've seen a lot of Caribbean jurisdictions get out of the banking business. They've been out of the offshore services business in some cases entirely. They've raised tax rates. I mean, the Caribbean is not this paradise that people think if they watch television or they watch movies. So St. Martin perhaps is a place where you've got to show, oh, I've got a home here. I've got some kind of connection here. That's very much the case in a place like the Cayman Islands. Some of the other jurisdictions are more open. But I don't think that would be a place where if I'm a billionaire, I want to go and open an account unless I have some kind of connection there. Because a lot of the Caribbean jurisdictions, you pay huge fees. The banks aren't, in many cases, as well managed. The service isn't that good. There's a few that stand out in the Bahamas and the Caymans, maybe a few others. But I think these are basically places where he has a connection. They also say that Trump paid nearly $200,000 in taxes to China, according to the New York Times. But the big thing they're focused on is the offshore bank accounts. And so what people should realize is, I watch shows on TV where they talk about, oh, some guy's got $10 million in a boat, probably going to one of those money holes like Aruba or something like that. Just not really how it works. And so, by the way, Donald Trump, when becoming president, was a very politically exposed person. A lot of banks are going to want to deal with that if he's some kind of owner of a company. Now, obviously, again, Trump's affairs, it's not just, hey, I own 100% of a company and it's just a very simple structure. I mean, he obviously has very complex structures. But still, I mean, if one of your ultimate beneficial owners is the president of the United States, you are going to have issues. I just saw one bank that said, oh, okay, we take some politically exposed people, some PEPs, we charge them 5 times the already high fees we charge everyone else to manage their account, because we just have to maintain so much compliance to make sure that they're not doing anything untoward. And so it's hard enough for you to go to some of these jurisdictions. If you go to the UK, if you're an American or if you're a Western European, there may be a few banks, we work with 1 or 2, that would take you, if you're going to deposit, £1 to £2 million. And there's maybe a few more if you're in the £3 to £5 million range. But most of them, and certainly just the average retail bank, is not just going to take someone who has no job, no home, no reason to be in the UK. Ireland, very much the same. China does sometimes take people. Hong Kong has made it very difficult to get a bank account. China, it's possible. I think it's also become much harder. By the way, nothing in China is done remotely, really. So when I'm looking at this, I'm saying the bank account was closed in 2018 when Donald Trump was president. Certainly someone could have had a power of attorney. There could have been some procedure. But that would have seemed to be kind of a brouhaha in the sense of the sitting U.S. president is closing an account in China. Again, nothing really done very remotely there. Very much an in-person presence kind of jurisdiction from the time that I spent in China many years ago. Other comment from The Guardian. Daniel Goldman, now a congressman-elect from New York, but in a former role as lead Democratic counsel in Donald Trump's first impeachment, has a question about what the tax returns released show. Trump had bank accounts in China, again until 2018. Generally, you only have bank accounts in a foreign country if you were doing transactions in that country's currency. So Daniel Goldman may be a congressman-elect from New York, but an expert on the reasons for having offshore bank accounts, he is most certainly not. To me, maybe the biggest reason not to have an offshore bank account is you want to run for political office, and either you're going to be like most people running for political office, like for running for U.S. president, and release your tax returns, which I suppose could include these extra schedules that show your bank accounts, foreign bank accounts, and you think, hey, people won't like that, right? I've often wondered, by the way, if I were to reacquire U.S. citizenship, could I run for president on the basis of being, I am indeed a natural-born U.S. citizen. I was born of the land, unlike Ted Cruz. Obviously, nobody would vote for a guy who gave up his citizenship and then came back. But could I run? And to me, the political reasons are the biggest reason you don't want to do it. You always see these politicians, oh, we had a company here, we had a company there. You see the Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers. listen, if you're in office and you're getting money from corruption, that's obviously shady. That's obviously not the right reason. If you're Donald Trump, if you're any business person who goes into political office, you may have some of these setups, but the average person doesn't understand that. What Daniel Goldman doesn't understand is you can bank in countries all around the world and you can hold US dollars. Now, you may not want to if you want to diversify out of the US dollar because you already hold those in the United States. I'm sure Donald Trump, most of his assets are denominated in US dollars, whether it's property, whether it's cash, what have you. But if you want just to be detached from the US system, you could hold another currency, but there are plenty of banks. I mean, in the aforementioned countries, Georgia, you would hold US dollars very easily. Ecuador, for example, I mentioned, that is their currency, the US dollar. Panama, basically the currency is the US dollar. Cambodia, another place that used to be easy, they pay very high interest rates. I think, was there some talk about Trump doing something once in the casino industry, which has gone crazy in the last 10 years since I first started going there. Basically their currency is the US dollar. They have their own, but essentially everything is done at a large level in US dollars. And so many other countries around the world, I mean, banks from Portugal to, everywhere, you can hold US dollars in most cases. Maybe not in the smallest or cheapest of retail accounts, but you can hold US dollars. Same with euros. If you live in Europe and you want to hold euros, you can go to Georgia or many other countries. Now, the US dollar is number one in terms of acceptance, but you'll find plenty of banks around the world that let you hold euros. I mean, if you go to a bank in Singapore, you can hold 15 different currencies, and you can even buy and sell others to send. So yes, you might be doing transaction in that country's currency, but that's the only reason you would do it. Is absolutely silly. Again, in the case of Donald Trump, my intuition tells me he's doing business, and so you have a business venture there, and you receive money, you send money. If these accounts are his personally, the idea would be, okay, I run a company. I don't know that Donald Trump has immigration permission any more than he just would go as a tourist, or through the proper procedure if he's a head of state. But I don't know that he has a residence permit in the UK. Certainly we've talked about how with his mother being from Scotland, potentially would be eligible for dual citizenship there. Ireland, I have no indication that he has the ability to reside in these countries that would facilitate in an easier way having a personal bank account. Certainly if you have a strong business connection there and you have multi-millions of dollars in a business account, the bank very well may say, hey, we may not do this for most people, but, we have a multi-million-dollar relationship, we know who you are, we will give you a personal account. And I suppose that maybe there's some business case for saying, I'm going to take a dividend, for example, out into that other country, into my personal bank account. As a U.S. person, just a U.S. citizen not living in the United States, let alone you live in New York, you live in Florida, as Donald Trump has, there's no tax advantage to doing that. And so obviously there's a lot of international tax planning, having businesses in the UK, Ireland, et cetera, and how that works with being in the US, which is what Nomad Capitalist does for folks. We have a whole team of CPAs and lawyers and other people who we help put the pieces together that when you want to go overseas and you want to live in a country that has taxes, but you don't want to be double taxed, you want to reduce your taxes, how do you make all these different jurisdictions work together in a way that actually makes sense, that you can reduce your taxes and stay in good shape and be legal? That's what Nomad Capitalist does. We have all these different folks around the world that we make sure it gets done cleanly, because too many people are trying to move out of the United States to lower their taxes. Maybe they call it domestic accountant. They should be calling it international accountant, but then they're in 4 other jurisdictions with bank accounts, corporations, and where they live, and you need someone to manage that all together. So none of this looks really that untoward to me. People might have a complaint that Trump did not release these tax returns. They basically forced his hand. I saw that he was out recently saying, it only makes me stronger. It shows what a great job I've done running great companies, doing big things for people. But to me, this is pretty plain vanilla stuff, and the media is blowing it out of proportion. I'm not saying that because I love or hate Donald Trump. I'm just saying that because having offshore bank accounts, to me, is just a pretty normal thing as long as they're legally reported, which it appears like, since it is in his tax return, that they just released all the different schedules. And so this just shows you don't want to follow your congressman-elect from New York. You don't want to follow the only reason you do it if you're doing transactions in a foreign currency. That's not correct. plenty of people just diversify and they just put their US dollars, they move them from the US to a bank in the UK. If you have a couple million, you can do that. They move them to Singapore. Americans, for example, all the Singaporean banks won't let you do any investments, but they will let you hold foreign currency. Just let it sit there or open a term deposit. I mean, right now, US dollars are the highest yielding currency in the world. So if you just said, hey, I want some diversification, I'm going to go to Singapore and open a bank account. I'm going to put a couple hundred grand in there, and I can't really do anything with it. All right, put it into term deposit, and I'm going to make close to 5% in US dollars. Yes, I can hold Hong Kong dollars, Canadian dollars, Australian dollars. Those currencies don't yield as much. And so, give me the higher yield. I won't pay tax on that in Singapore, but I will pay tax on that if I'm a US person. So, all blended in proportion, as is often the case. You should know that as long as you're legally reporting everything, having offshore bank accounts, financial accounts, trusts, corporations, all legitimate, whether you're doing business in those countries or just whether you want to diversify your currency or your geography.